Hello everyone. I am the Midnight Storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. My name's Luca. I'm 27 years old, and for the last 3 months, I've been working as a night guard at an old school in a nearly abandoned town called Eladi. It's one of those places you won't find on a current map. A ghost of a community that used to thrive before the factories shut down and the water went bad. Now, no one lives here. No one, except the ghosts of what used to be. During the day, a few techs come through the building, maybe to sort out paperwork or haul old equipment. But once the sun goes down, I'm the only living soul inside these halls. The first week was uneventful. I stayed in my little office near the front entrance, reading books, watching the monitors. Once an hour, I'd do a walk through the empty hallways, checking doors and windows, making sure everything was locked. But on the second week, something changed. It was 2:13 a.m. I remember the time exactly because I had just started my round from the top floor and was heading down the west stairwell when I heard something slam. It came from the old chemistry lab, a room that hasn't been used in years. The sound was loud, like a desk had been flipped over. I paused, heart racing. I radioed the main office just in case, but the supervisor confirmed what I already knew: I was alone in the building. Still, I had to check. When I reached the door, it was slightly open, which was strange. I always made sure it was locked. Inside, one of the tables had been overturned. A chair was broken in the corner. Nothing else seemed touched. But there, in the thick dust covering the floor, were footprints. Bare footprints. Human. They led across the room and just stopped by the wall. I don't know what disturbed me more, that the prints ended suddenly, or that they weren't mine. I reset the room, locked the door, and returned to my office. But I didn't sleep the rest of the night. After that night in the chemistry lab, I started noticing smaller things. Sounds, mostly. The hum of a vending machine that had been unplugged for years. A door creaking shut 3 floors above me when no windows were open. It could have all been explained. Old buildings shift, settle, groan, but this didn't feel structural. It felt intentional. 2 nights later, around 3 a.m., I was walking the main hallway on the first floor, the one that runs between the gym and the old library. Halfway through, I stopped cold. The air changed. It's hard to explain, but it felt like the hallway was suddenly pressurized. Like something had inhaled the entire corridor, and I was standing inside its lungs. I stood still, trying to rationalize the sensation, when every light above me dimmed at once. Not flickered. Dimmed, like someone slowly turned down a dimmer switch. Then, one by one, the classroom doors began to click. Not open. Not slam. Just unlock. Click. 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 Like a ripple passing down the hallway. I drew my flashlight, heart pounding, and turned to look behind me. All the doors were still shut, but the locks, they were in the open position now. I called out. "Security, is anyone there?" Even though I knew no one would answer. The silence that followed was so deep it made my ears ring. Then, from the very end of the hallway, I heard it, breathing. Deep. Slow. And not mine. I turned off my flashlight and backed into a janitor's closet, closing the door slowly behind me. My radio was dead. No static. No hum, just silence. Outside the closet, the footsteps began. Bare feet. Walking past my door. then stopping, right in front of it. And then 3 soft knocks. Not loud, not violent, just patient. I didn't breathe. Whoever was on the other side of that door, if it was even a person, they didn't move after the knocks. No turning of the handle. No footsteps retreating. Just silence. And then, the closet got cold. Not just chilly, freezing. I could see my breath in front of me, hanging in the air like smoke. The kind of cold that gets into your bones. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear anything. And that's when I noticed it. A sound. Faint, muffled. Whispering. Not in English. Not even in a language I recognized. Just a soft, rhythmic murmur, like chanting. I backed away from the door slowly, not even daring to blink. The whispering got louder for just a second, and then stopped. Dead silence. And just when I thought it was over, just when I thought maybe it had passed, something scraped across the door from top to bottom. Not like a nail. Like a key. A long, metal drag, slow and deliberate. Then the footsteps resumed. 1 step. 2. 3. Fading down the hallway. I waited a full 10 minutes before opening the door. The hallway was empty again. The lights were back to normal. No footprints, no strange temperature, no sign that anyone, or anything, had been there. But the door to room 2B, the old history classroom, was now wide open. Inside, everything was coated in dust, except for 1 chair in the front row. That chair was clean. And still warm. I didn't want to step inside. Something about that room felt occupied. Like walking in would be an intrusion. But I couldn't ignore protocol, and besides, I needed to prove to myself that this was all explainable. That maybe someone had snuck in. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was just starting to break. I stepped through the doorway of room 2B. The air inside was dense. Not cold, like the closet, but heavy. Like walking underwater. Every breath took effort. There were 32 student desks arranged in perfect rows, all coated in a soft layer of dust, except for the one near the window. The clean one. I approached it slowly, shining my flashlight around. That's when I noticed the chalkboard. There was writing on it. Not chalk. Finger writing. The dust had been pushed aside by someone's hand. It read, "You took the shift. Now take the lesson." I stepped back. My body tensed. I scanned the floor for more footprints, but there were none. Not even mine. The dust was undisturbed. Like the floor had reset itself. Then I heard it, a low creak behind me. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone at the door. Nothing. The chair, the clean chair, was now turned toward the blackboard. Facing it. Like someone had just been sitting in it. I froze. That's when I heard the projector click on. But this school didn't have working projectors. And yet, across the far wall, a beam of flickering light began playing. No screen. No sound. Just a silent film, grainy, colorless, jittering images of a classroom, this classroom. The same desks. The same chalkboard. And at the teacher's desk, was me. I stood motionless, staring at the flickering wall. The projection showed me, sitting at the teacher's desk in room 2B, staring straight ahead. The room looked just as it did now. Same lighting. Same angle. Same everything. Except my eyes. In the projection, my eyes were pitch black. No whites. No reflection. Just voids. And behind me, in the film, the desks began filling up. One by one, shadowy figures took their seats. Students, or at least, things shaped like them. Too thin. Too long. Their heads tilted forward, necks craned unnaturally, like their spines were coiled springs. The image crackled. Then the me in the projection slowly stood up. It looked straight into the camera, into me. And it smiled. Not like someone glad to see themselves. Like someone who had been waiting. The projector shut off on its own. Just, click, and darkness. I scanned the room. Nothing had moved, but I no longer felt alone. There was a presence now. Like air thick with static. Then the speaker system, which had never worked, came to life with a burst of feedback. And a voice. Lesson 1, never ignore the roll call. I sprinted out of the room. As I slammed the door shut behind me, I caught one final glance through the glass window, the desks. Now all clean. All occupied. And every head was slowly turning toward the door. I didn't stop running until I reached the main stairwell. My footsteps echoed like gunshots in the empty building. The lights flickered as I passed, not randomly, but in sync. Like something was following. Chasing. I grabbed my radio. Still dead. No static. No response. I tried my phone, no signal. Not even a fake one. Just a black screen and the time stuck at 2:13 a.m. The same minute everything started. I made it to the security office, slammed the door, and locked it behind me. My breath came in short bursts. I stared at the monitors, expecting to see the hallway empty. But it wasn't. Room 2B's door was wide open again. And the hallway in front of it? Lined with those same shadow students. They were standing now. Out of the desks. Facing the camera. Perfectly still. All except one. A figure near the front, slightly taller, was slowly walking toward the camera. Toward me. I watched in horror as it passed each hallway monitor. Camera 4. Camera 3. Camera 2. And then I heard it. Click. The doorknob to the security office twitched. Something was on the other side. It didn't bang. It didn't force its way in. It just waited. Then from the ceiling speaker, the same broken one, came a second voice. This time it wasn't distorted. It was my voice. You took attendance. Now stay for the lesson. I backed away from the door, heart pounding in my ears, eyes still glued to the monitors. The figure, the one that had walked toward the camera, was no longer on screen. It had reached the blind spot between the final hallway and my office. I was trapped. The room felt tighter by the second. I tried to rationalize, maybe it's a prank. Maybe someone hacked the feed. Maybe it's sleep deprivation. Then I looked at the wall clock. 2:13 a.m. Still. Time wasn't just stuck, it was being held hostage. The lights in the office dimmed, just like in the hallway. My monitor screens began to distort, static crawling in from the edges like frost. Then, one by one, the monitors switched from camera feeds to faces. Each screen now showed a student. Pale. Still. Eyes black and unblinking. All of them staring at me. Except one. In the center screen, I was sitting in the classroom again. Back in room 2B. But I hadn't moved. I was still in the office. Right? The me on the screen smiled again, and behind him, chalk began to write itself on the board. Lesson 2, you're not the only shift. I stood up, unsure what was real anymore. Then the office phone rang. Not my cell. Not the walkie. The landline. An old, dust-covered rotary phone no one had touched in decades. It rang once. Twice. I stared. Third ring. And then, it answered itself. A quiet breath on the other end. Then a whisper. The bell is about to ring. And from somewhere deep inside the school, a school bell rang. Not the modern kind. The old kind, clanging, mechanical, from another era. And behind me, the lock on the door clicked open. The sound of the bell echoed through every wall, vibrating the floor beneath me. It wasn't a digital tone. It was the kind of bell you'd hear in a century-old church tower. Heavy. Final. The door to the office creaked open behind me. Slowly, like it didn't want to startle me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Instead, I stared at the monitors. They were all black now. Except one. Room 2B. It was live again. Every seat was filled. Every figure was still. And at the front of the class, I stood, again. That version of me turned toward the camera, no smile this time, and lifted his hand. He pointed downward. Then the floor beneath me groaned. Like something massive was shifting just beneath the tiles. I turned around. The office was empty. But the hallway outside wasn't. From where I stood, I could see just a sliver of the corridor, and a shadow moving past the glass. Tall. Unnatural in shape. Moving slow. And it was humming. A low, tuneless sound that made my teeth ache. Like static in musical form. I backed away from the doorway and turned to the emergency panel on the wall, the one that connects to the fire alarm and lockdown system. I slammed the lockdown button. Nothing. Dead. Then the humming stopped. In its place, the speaker above crackled one more time. This shift is over. The lesson continues, downstairs. My stomach sank. I had never been downstairs. The basement was always locked. But now, the lights on the panel lit up, only one hallway. One direction. The basement door had been unlocked remotely. And it was open. I didn't want to go down there. Every instinct screamed at me to run. To break a window, to abandon the job, the paycheck, the contract, all of it. But the building wasn't letting me leave. The front doors wouldn't budge. The windows were sealed. Time was still stuck at 2:13 a.m. So I went down the stairwell. Slowly. Each step echoed like I was descending into a cathedral of rot. The air changed again, thick, damp, and metallic, like breathing in old blood and rust. I reached the bottom and stood in front of the heavy metal door that led to the basement corridor. It had always been padlocked. Always marked, no access. But tonight, it stood wide open. Inside was a hallway that shouldn't have existed. Too long. Too deep. The lights overhead flickered but never stayed on. Each time they blinked off, I saw something move farther down the corridor. Not walking, crawling. The walls were lined with lockers, just like a normal school. Except they were all open. And inside each one hung a piece of old student clothing, faded uniforms, broken glasses, torn shoes, but worse, some of them still had names written in marker. And I recognized one. It was mine. My name, scribbled in black permanent ink on a hoodie I lost years ago in a completely different city. I stepped back. That's when the lockers slammed shut at once. The sound roared through the corridor like a gunshot. Then the hallway lights died completely. Darkness. Total. But in the pitch black, I saw it, not with my eyes, but somewhere deeper. A shape. Tall. Crooked. And whispering. In every direction. Class dismissed. Time to begin again. And from behind me, the basement door slammed shut. I lunged at the basement door, slammed my fists against it, yanked the handle, kicked the bottom, nothing. Sealed. Like it had never opened in the first place. Behind me, the whispering grew louder. Not one voice now. Dozens. Hundreds. Layered over each other like a swarm of flies inside my ears. I turned around slowly, pressing my back to the door. The corridor stretched longer than before. It had changed. The lockers were gone. Now there were desks. Hundreds of them, lined up in perfect rows, leading endlessly into the dark. Each with a flickering candle on top. Each facing the front of an invisible classroom I hadn't yet reached. And at the very first desk, sat me. Not the twisted version I'd seen in the projection. This one looked exactly like me. Same shirt. Same shoes. Same bruise on my knuckle from earlier. He stared down at an open notebook and slowly began to write. I crept forward, heart rattling inside my ribs, trying to see what he was scribbling. As I approached, I saw the words forming. You took the shift. You stayed for the lesson. Now finish the assignment. The writing didn't stop. Line after line. Same sentence. Same pressure. Same hand. I reached out, and the figure looked up. It had no face. Just smooth skin, like wax melted over a human head. I stumbled backward in horror. The candles on the desks began to blow out one by one, starting from the back of the room and racing toward me. PFT. 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 Darkness chasing light. I turned and ran, deeper into the corridor, past the desks, past the last flickering flame, until I saw a door. Wooden. Old. Carved with a word, faculty. And I heard a voice from the other side. My voice. Come in. It's your turn to teach. The door felt warm to the touch. Not comforting warm, feverish. The kind of heat that comes right before something rots. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the rusted handle. Behind the door, my voice repeated, "You're late. The staff is waiting." Then, laughter. Soft, polite, like faculty chuckling at an inside joke. Except it didn't sound human. Too flat. Too synchronized. Too rehearsed. I pushed the door open. The room beyond was a twisted mockery of a teacher's lounge. Broken chairs, stained wallpaper, and flickering ceiling fans that spun without air. There were figures seated all around the room, silhouettes in torn suits, dresses from another century, glasses with cracked lenses. All turned to look at me. But they didn't have faces either. Only smooth indentations where their features should have been. Each of them held a report card. One stood and walked over to me, placing a manila folder in my hands. I opened it. It was my file. Name. Date of birth. Former schools. Jobs. Medical records. Even things I had never told anyone, written neatly in ink. At the bottom of the file was a final line, position, Permanent night faculty. Contract begins, 2:13 a.m. Contract ends, never. I dropped the folder and backed away, but the door behind me was gone. Just a wall now. Painted over. Absorbed. One of the figures stepped forward and raised what looked like an old-fashioned school bell. It rang. Once. And in that single chime, the walls of the room breathed. The ceiling twisted like a vortex. The lights dimmed to a deep red. Then I heard my own voice, not from the speakers, not from any figure, but inside my skull. The shift never ends when you become part of the school. The walls groaned as the bell's echo faded, like the building itself was adjusting its spine. The faceless faculty turned in unison and began shuffling. Not walking, gliding, soundless, in circles around the room like a ritual. As they moved, the ceiling above shifted again, now resembling a swirling blackboard covered in chalk lines, except the lines were moving, erasing and rewriting themselves in real time. In the center of the room appeared a desk. Massive. Wooden. Ancient. A chair scraped itself backward behind it, inviting me to sit. I didn't move. Then one of the figures, the tallest, placed a heavy object on the desk. It was a ledger. Bound in skin. The cover read, Attendance. My name was the first entry. Next to it, white heavy checkmark present. Contract initiated. Below it, were dozens more names. Some scratched out. Some marked detention. And one, at the very bottom, had no name at all. Just an empty line. Waiting for a signature. The chair behind me creaked, even though I hadn't sat in it. I looked around. The faculty had stopped moving. They were watching me now. Not with eyes. Just waiting. Then from the ceiling came a single piece of chalk, spinning as it fell, landing on the desk beside the ledger. And the room whispered as one, take your place. Teach the night. Or be taught by it. My hands trembled. I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to sign. But the door was gone. The time, still 2:13 a.m. And my shift had never ended. Didn't sign the ledger. But I didn't leave either. Because there was nowhere to leave. The chalk sat beside the book like a threat. Or maybe a test. I stared at that blank line under my name. It seemed to throb, like a fresh wound waiting to be sealed. I looked up again. The faculty had changed. Now, they weren't faceless. They had faces, mine. Every single one. Dozens of me, wearing slight variations. Different hair lengths, scars I used to have, clothes I'd worn years ago. A mirror maze of every version of myself. They all stared with dull, knowing eyes. One stepped forward, placed a hand on my shoulder, and leaned in. We all resisted. At first. Then we remembered, we applied for this. I shook my head. No. I didn't apply for it, but then I remembered something. An old job post I saw years ago. Night supervisor. Isolated site. Must be comfortable with silence. Good pay. I applied as a joke. Never got a reply. Or so I thought. The room shuddered. The chalk rolled across the desk and stopped at the edge of the ledger, right over the line. Waiting. Suddenly, the lights above flickered again, and in that flicker, the desk in front of me was gone. Instead, I was standing, at the front of a classroom. The desks were full. The students stared forward. But their faces, blank slates. Not human. Not alien. Just voids. and every one of them wore a name tag. Each one said, "Substitute." Then a loud creaking behind me, the door at the back of the class opened. And I heard footsteps. One student, late, dragging a chair behind them. Their tag? Replacement. And they looked just like me. The figure stepped into the room, dragging the rusted chair behind them, that harsh screeching sound echoing like nails across a tomb wall. They moved slowly. Purposefully. Not confused. Not scared. Like they had done this before. Like I had. They walked right past the rows of silent substitutes, their hollow faces all turning as one to follow. Then the figure stopped, at the front of the class, and sat down at my desk. My desk. I stepped back, heart racing. This wasn't just someone who looked like me. It was me. Not a clone. Not a shadow. Me, from earlier. From before I took the shift. Before everything. His eyes met mine, real eyes, not black voids. And in them, I saw confusion. Fear. The kind I had when I first arrived. Then I realized, he didn't recognize me. Because he was me, from before it started. From when I thought I was just taking a job. From when I thought it was just another paycheck. The faculty stood now, all in unison. They raised their hands and pointed at me. The ledger reappeared on the desk, pages flapping violently like wings in a storm. My signature was there now. Below it, one word had been added, transferred. The lights above buzzed. The bell rang. And I felt my legs moving without my control, walking toward the back of the room, toward the door. The voice in the speaker crackled back to life. The class has a new instructor. The old one moves on, to administration. The door at the back of the classroom opened on its own as I approached, not with a creak this time, but a low groan, like the building was sighing in relief. I crossed the threshold. Behind me, the classroom faded into static. Not blackness. Not silence, but that humming distortion of a signal that never quite comes through. Ahead of me was a long hallway. Carpeted. Sterile. Lit by buzzing fluorescent lights that stretched forever. On the wall, framed photos of students and staff, except every face had been scratched out. Some violently. Some surgically. I walked. I don't know for how long. Time was still frozen at 2:13 a.m., even here. Eventually, I reached a wooden door, plain, but official. Brass plate, etched in careful cursive, Vice Principal of Continuity. I opened it. Inside was an office, no windows. Bookshelves full of blank tomes. A single clock ticking backward. And a desk. Behind it sat a man. His face was not blank like the others. But I couldn't describe it. Every time I blinked, it changed, familiar, unfamiliar, old, young, even mine for a second. He gestured to the seat across from him. I sat. He slid a folder across the desk. No name on it. No label. I opened it. Inside, dozens of job applications. All mine. From every stage of my life. All ending in the same line, willing to work nights. Will do anything for good pay. He finally spoke, his voice like rusted hinges on a locked gate. You've been promoted. I tried to ask, promoted to what? But the words didn't leave my mouth. I looked down. The folder was gone. In its place, a single paper. My contract. Signed in full. Job title, Administrator of the Shift. The man across from me stood, buttoned his coat, and walked past me. As he reached the door, he turned. His face was finally still. It was mine. My shift is over. Yours has just begun. The door closed behind him. And I sat there. At the desk. With the clock ticking backward. And 2:13 a.m. never ending. The job nobody wanted. I was 26, broke, and desperate when I took the job. $25 an hour. Cash. All I had to do was sit overnight at a construction site on the outskirts of a town that no longer had a name on the map. It was supposed to be simple. The company was tearing down what was left of an old government building and prepping the ground for a shopping center. Day crews were handling the demo, but they wanted someone on site at night, for security, they said. What exactly I was securing, they didn't explain. No heavy equipment. No trailers. Just a field of dirt, and a single old portable office unit where I'd stay. The guy who hired me, greasy hair, cheap cologne, clipboard full of waivers, didn't even ask for ID. Just said, "Don't go near the south fence. That area's not stable." Then he smiled like it was a joke, slapped the side of the office trailer, and left. I settled in that night with a thermos of coffee, my phone, and the hum of silence that only comes from being nowhere. The site was surrounded by chain-link fencing and distant hills. No street lights. Just a floodlight on a motion sensor that would flicker on occasionally like a lighthouse trying to remember it existed. At around 2 a.m., I heard it for the first time. A knocking. From beneath the floorboards of the trailer. Soft at first. Deliberate. 3 knocks. Pause. Then 3 more. I froze. There was nothing under the trailer. I had checked it myself when I parked my car earlier. It was just elevated plywood. No basement. No storage. Just air and dirt beneath me. I sat perfectly still, not breathing. Then, again. Knock. 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 This time, closer to my chair. And then, the floodlight outside came on. Something was moving at the south fence. The one they told me to stay away from. The floodlight flickered, throwing long shadows across the mounds of disturbed earth. I pressed my face to the grimy window of the trailer, squinting out into the night. And there it was. Movement. Near the far edge of the site, where the chain-link fence sagged and dipped into a ditch. Something, or someone, was crouched near the south fence. I grabbed my flashlight, heart racing, and cracked the trailer door open. The night air hit me like a wall. Cold, heavier than it had been earlier, like the oxygen itself was trying to warn me. I stepped out slowly, boots crunching on loose gravel. The figure wasn't moving now. It was watching me. At least, I think it was. I couldn't make out a face. Just the outline of a head tilted sideways, like it was studying me. "Hey!" I called out, instantly regretting it. No response. No flinch. I took a few steps forward, flashlight beam unsteady. The wind picked up and with it came a low groan. Not from the wind itself, but from the ground. It sounded like the earth exhaling. That's when I noticed, the dirt near the south fence was sunken in, like something had been burrowing. Then the figure at the fence stood. Too tall. Too fast. Its proportions were wrong. Its legs bent the wrong way. Its head craned far past what a neck should allow. And just like that, the floodlight snapped off. Total darkness. I ran. Tripped up the metal steps and slammed the trailer door shut behind me, locking it, breathing hard. Inside, Silence. For 1 second. Then, knock. 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 Not from below this time. From the window. Right beside me. The knock came again. Knock. 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 3 times, right against the glass next to my head. I turned slowly, expecting to see a face. A person. But there was nothing. Just fog. A thick, swirling condensation spreading across the window from outside, as if something warm was breathing onto the glass. And then I saw it, not a reflection. Not a shadow. A handprint. Thin fingers. Much too long. Pressed against the glass like it was reaching in. But when I jumped back, flashlight ready, the window was clear again. No fog. No handprint. Nothing. I stared at the door. Still locked. Then I looked down. The floorboards were flexing. Bending upward slightly. Like something underneath was pushing against them. I scrambled to the corner of the trailer and stood on the table. And that's when my radio, the one the company gave me but never said to use, suddenly came alive. A sharp burst of static, then a low, strained voice, "You're not supposed to be there. It doesn't like when the ground is disturbed." I froze. "Who is this?" I said, voice shaking. More static. Then, it was buried too shallow. The line cut. Silence again. Except for one thing. The knocking resumed. But now it was in rhythm. Like it was trying to mimic speech. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 1 knock. Like a message I couldn't understand. And then, the trailer started to tilt. The entire floor shifted slightly beneath me, groaning on its supports. And from outside, I heard metal tearing. The fence was being ripped open. The sound outside was unmistakable, metal being shredded. I crawled to the trailer window, heart thudding, and peered through the blinds. The floodlight was off again, but the moonlight gave just enough glow to catch the motion. The south fence was peeled back like a sardine lid. Sections of it bent outward, ripped from the posts. Something had come through, not gone out. And the dirt, the disturbed patch near the fence had collapsed. Caved in like a sinkhole. Something had risen. I grabbed the flashlight and flicked it on, even though the batteries were flickering red. The beam caught the torn fence for just a second, long enough to see a trail. A deep groove dragged through the dirt. Like a heavy object had slithered its way toward the trailer. Then the radio crackled again. Same voice. It moved. "You shouldn't have watched it." I shouted into the mic, "What the hell is it?" "What do you mean, watched it?" Static. "They built this place on top of it. Try to keep it sealed. But digging wakes it up." My stomach turned. The sinkhole. The south fence. The knocking. It wasn't someone messing with me. It was something old. And it had been under this place long before the construction crews came. I ran to the door and tried to push it open, jammed. The trailer had shifted on its stilts. The frame was warped from the pressure. Suddenly, the floor let out a low groan, followed by a violent bang from beneath. Something massive slammed into the base of the trailer. It lifted slightly. Dropped. My ears popped. The lights above flickered and went dark. I was in complete blackness now. Then I heard it again, right behind the wall, a low voice. Not from the radio. Inside the trailer. Whispering in a language I'd never heard. breathing like gravel being exhaled. The trailer walls felt like they were breathing, expanding and contracting in slow, sick waves. The whispering didn't stop. It was constant now, low and hoarse, coming from inside the walls. Not voices exactly, more like thoughts being forced into my head. Foreign, angry thoughts. I backed away into the corner, flashlight trembling in my grip. The battery blinked red, barely giving me anything to see by. Then I saw the floor split. Right in the center of the trailer, a hairline crack appeared and began to widen. The smell hit me next, a mix of soil, rust, and something dead. And from that widening crack, dirt began to rise. Not fall in, rise. Like it was being pushed up from below. Clumps of it spilled out onto the linoleum floor, and inside the dirt were fragments. Bone. Old tools. A decayed ID badge, with a name scratched off. And a glove, still filled with a hand. I dropped the flashlight. The radio screeched again. But this time it wasn't the voice from earlier. This one was deeper. Not mechanical. Not human. It spoke through the speaker. Or maybe from behind it, you opened the ground. Now it opens you. And then the trailer lurched. It tilted sharply, throwing me to the floor, the crack now gaping, wide enough to swallow a person whole. As I scrambled to my feet, something reached out. A long, pale arm, thin, segmented like an insect's, but human in skin, emerged from the crack and slammed onto the floor. Then another. And then, slowly, it pulled itself up. It wasn't climbing. It was unfolding. Like it had been flattened under the earth for centuries, waiting for someone dumb enough to wake it. I stumbled back, screaming, and ran for the emergency hatch at the trailer's rear. But just before I got there, I heard my name. Not shouted. Not spoken. Whispered inside my mind, in my own voice. Stay. The shift isn't over. The emergency hatch refused to budge. I slammed my shoulder into it again and again, but the trailer had shifted too far, the frame was twisted, jammed in place. Behind me, the thing was still rising. Its body dragged itself through the crack like a twisted marionette, unfolding bone by bone. It wasn't made to stand in this world. It stretched wrong. Its arms bent where they shouldn't. And its head, there were no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, rounded surface that shimmered in the dark like wet stone. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. My legs refused to obey me. Then, the radio buzzed again. But this time, not static. Not whispers. A woman's voice. Clear. Urgent. If you're still alive, listen to me. Get to the generator shack. Southwest corner. There's a key on the underside. Don't stop. Don't look back. The trailer shook again. The walls warped inward, groaning like they were mourning. The thing inside let out a sound, not a roar. Not a growl. It was a tone. Low. Vibrating my teeth. Like a tuning fork made for the dead. That's what finally broke the paralysis. I ran. I didn't even remember grabbing the flashlight again, but I had it in my fist, bouncing light through the thick air. I burst out the front door, slipped on the gravel, caught myself, and ran across the open site. The wind was howling now, but the trees weren't moving. Only the earth. Like it was breathing from below. Expanding and sighing with every footstep I took. I found the shack. Small. Metal. Barely holding together. I dropped to my knees and felt underneath. My fingers brushed something cold and sharp. A key. I fumbled with the lock, nearly dropping it twice. Behind me, I heard the trailer explode, not from fire, but from force. Metal shrieking. Something big had come out. I got the door open and slammed it shut behind me, locking it. Inside was a single red switch marked, "Emergency Reset," "Ground Stabilization," and a faded label above it, "Do not activate during excavation." I didn't think. I pulled it. The switch clunked into place with a metallic snap that echoed like a gunshot. For a second, nothing. Then the ground beneath the shack began to rumble. Not a quake. Not random tremors. A pattern. Deliberate pulses, in threes, like a giant underground heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the knock I had heard earlier. My ears popped. The air in the shack turned heavy, like pressure was building below instead of above. From the wall behind me, I heard mechanisms grinding. Something ancient and mechanical stirring after decades. Outside, the world sounded like it was screaming. The trailer, or what was left of it, collapsed into itself with a crunch of wood and metal. And from the far end of the site, I saw it, the creature. Fully emerged now. It didn't walk. It glided, pulled along by invisible strings, its limbs hovering inches from the ground. Its skin had changed. No longer pale, but glowing with symbols, pulsating red beneath its surface like magma through veins. It was scanning, not with eyes, but with intent. Looking for me. Then, it turned. And locked onto the shack. I stepped back, heart in my throat. Behind me, the generator unit kicked in, loud, violent, rattling the shack like it was made of tin foil. Lights flickered. An old monitor screen lit up, displaying 2 words, "Stasis mode," engaged suddenly. Outside, the ground opened. Really opened. Not a sinkhole, a seal. A massive stone slab split down the middle just yards from the shack, revealing staircases descending into pure black. And the creature stopped. It turned toward the opening. Its head tilted. Then, it began to descend the stairs, back into the earth. Like it had been summoned home. I watched, frozen, as it disappeared into the darkness. The slab began to close. And just before it sealed completely, I swear I saw something wave from below. The stone slab sealed with a final thud that echoed across the entire site. Silence fell. No wind. No generator hum. No radio static. Just me, standing in a rattling metal shack in the middle of a construction site that now looked like a battlefield. I stepped outside slowly, half expecting the ground to give out beneath me again. But it was still. Almost peaceful. The sky had taken on a faint red tint. Not dawn, it was still barely 3 a.m. My watch hadn't moved. Time was frozen again. I walked toward the slab. Where there had once been loose dirt and fence, now lay a smooth stone seal, etched with unfamiliar symbols, the same ones that had pulsed under the creature's skin. I knelt down and pressed my palm against the surface. It was warm. Still pulsing. Still alive. I pulled my hand back and noticed dust on my palm, gray, gritty, and fine. It shimmered slightly in the moonlight. The kind of dust that doesn't come from stone. The kind that comes from bone. My stomach turned. I stumbled back, feeling watched again. Not from a direction. Just a presence hanging in the air. I turned toward the parking lot where I'd left my car. Gone. Not stolen, just gone. No tire marks. No broken glass. Just an empty patch of gravel, as if it had never been there. I grabbed the radio again. No sound. Then a faint whisper, "The earth remembers." I dropped it. I didn't want answers anymore. I just wanted to leave. I walked the long road back toward the highway on foot, the light of the moon stretching my shadow far too long behind me. Every once in a while, I'd hear it again, that knock. From underground. Sometimes close. Sometimes, under my feet. I walked for what felt like hours. The road should have taken me back to the main highway in 20 minutes. I'd checked the map before my first shift. It was a straight shot, a single lane of gravel and asphalt that led to Route 17. But I never reached it. The surroundings began to repeat. Same bend in the trees. Same broken signpost leaning left. Same old billboard for a diner that had been closed for years. It wasn't just déjà vu. I was looping. Time hadn't moved. The clock on my watch was still frozen at 2:57 a.m. I stopped walking and just stood there, trying to steady my breath. That's when I noticed it, a trail of footprints behind me. They were mine, but they didn't match my pace. They were spaced out too far. And some overlapped. Like I had been walking this loop for longer than I remembered. Then something else caught my eye. At the edge of the woods, just beyond the tree line, there was a shape. It was tall. Still. And it was wearing my uniform. I blinked, took a step forward, and it mirrored me, step for step. Another step. It copied. I raised my arm. It raised its own. But there was no face. Just a blank, smooth surface where a face should be. Like molded clay, never shaped. I stepped back. It stepped forward. The air turned cold again, not wind, but a sudden vacuum, like the space between me and it didn't exist anymore. Then I heard it, the same voice from the trailer radio, only now, clearer, more familiar. My own voice. "You stayed past your shift." I turned and ran. And this time, the road didn't loop. But I could hear it behind me, each footstep matching mine, perfectly. Like a second shadow, finally catching up. The road finally changed. The looping stopped, but it didn't lead back to the highway. Instead, it took me to a place I hadn't seen before, a small clearing in the woods, filled with broken machinery and weathered construction signs. It looked like an old part of the site, long forgotten. And at the center of it was a mirror. Not a real one, a tall, freestanding sheet of glass, propped against a tree. Cracked down the center. Its reflection was off, warped, delayed. Like it showed you 1 second too late. I stared into it. And what looked back wasn't quite me. It wore my clothes. It moved like I did. But its face was slack, empty behind the eyes. It smiled. I didn't. I turned to run. It reached through the glass. Through it. Its hand came out of the mirror, long, gloved in skin, dripping with that gray bone dust. It grabbed my shoulder. And suddenly, I was back in the trailer. Same flickering light. Same smell of dirt. Had I passed out? The radio sparked to life again. "You're in the fold now. The earth keeps what it wakes." I stumbled back, heart pounding. The mirror stood in the corner of the trailer. It hadn't been there before. In its reflection, I saw two of me. One breathing hard. The other still. Then the still one blinked. And the radio whispered, "Clock in." I staggered back from the mirror, knocking over a folding chair. But in the reflection, the second me didn't move. He stood there. Arms at his sides, eyes dull, mouth slightly open, like he was waiting. The radio kept repeating. Clock in. Clock in. Clock in. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. A ritual. I looked down at my security badge. The name was smudged now, unreadable. The photo? Not me anymore. The other me. Same uniform. Same face. But its smile, unnatural. Stretched too wide. Like it didn't belong to a body that had learned to smile properly. I backed up into the wall. The trailer was exactly how I'd left it, except wrong. The lights were too bright, buzzing in a strange frequency. The floor was wet, but it hadn't rained. I moved toward the door again, but the handle was gone. Just a smooth wall where the knob had been. I turned to the mirror. The other me had raised its hand. Palm forward. Inviting. My heart pounded as the lights began to flicker again, but not in panic. It was Morse code. I remembered some from training. 3 short. 3 long. 3 short. SOS. But it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from the mirror. The other me was trying to speak, mouthing words I couldn't hear. But I could read the lips. Let me out. Take my place. Your shift is over. And then, just for a second, I saw a third reflection. Not me. Not the copy. Something deeper. A silhouette in the blackness behind the glass. Tall. Twisted. Watching us both. The mirror shimmered, like heat over asphalt. The reflection flickered, the other me now pressed against the glass, hands splayed, face distorted in a silent scream. And behind him, that third figure loomed larger now. Its head nearly brushing the top of the mirror frame. Arms too long. Joints bending the wrong way. I stumbled back, flashlight clutched tightly, though it hadn't worked in hours. The air grew dense, like walking through oil. And then the voice returned. Not from the mirror. Not from the radio. Inside my skull. You asked for the job. Someone must stand watch. The trailer began to creak again, metal groaning, like something was coiling beneath it. I turned to the window, but there was no outside anymore. Just dirt. Pressed against the glass, like the trailer was now fully buried beneath the sight. I looked back at the mirror. The other me was gone. The surface was clear. Flat. Waiting. And then something behind me whispered, "You're late." I spun around. No one. But the air felt different. Like something had just stepped out of the mirror, and I hadn't noticed. The door, the one without a handle, opened slowly on its own. The corridor beyond looked like the inside of a mine. Timber beams. Dripping water. Walls of packed soil and ancient carvings. And in the distance, a light. A flickering bulb, the kind you only see in basements no one should enter. I should have run. Should have screamed. Should have done anything else. But instead, I stepped through. Because somehow, I knew, this was the real sight. And my shift had just begun. The moment I stepped through the door, the air changed. Heavy. Damp. Every breath tasted like mildew and rot, like rainwater trapped in an old coffin. The corridor stretched forward, impossibly long, carved straight into the earth, but with no sign of machinery. No tool marks. Like it had formed naturally, or worse, intentionally. The walls pulsed faintly. Like veins. As I walked deeper, the sound of my footsteps began to fade, replaced by echoes. Not mine. Whispers bounced around the tunnel, growing louder with each step. Some in my voice. Some in voices I recognized, my mother, my high school teacher, an old friend who died 2 years ago. They all whispered the same thing: "You're the watcher now. Keep it buried." I reached a fork in the tunnel. To the left, complete darkness. No sound. No air. To the right, the flickering bulb I'd seen earlier. I followed the light. The hallway opened into a wide underground chamber, larger than any basement could possibly be. At the center was a chair. A simple, rusted folding chair, facing a wall of soil. On the wall were a dozen monitors, all glowing faintly. Each showed a different view of the construction site, the trailers, the generator, the shack, and the slab. Only, the slab wasn't sealed anymore. One of the monitors showed it wide open again. The stairwell descending into shadow. And something at the bottom, watching the camera. Not moving. Not blinking. Just watching me. Then the radio on the table beside the chair crackled to life one final time. "All shifts are eternal. Sit down. Or become part of the earth." And I knew what they meant. It wasn't about guarding the site. I was the seal. I stared at the chair. Rusted. Worn. The seat fabric ripped like it had claw marks on it. But it wasn't the chair that scared me. It was what I knew would happen if I sat in it. I'd never leave. Not really. Something deep in the earth wanted a witness. Someone to see what was buried here, and to remember. But memory comes at a cost. And the longer I stood there, the more my thoughts started to echo. Not in the tunnel. In my head. Repeating. Doubling. I'd think, "Don't sit down." And my own voice would whisper back, "Sit down." I backed away from the chair, toward the tunnel that led in, but it was gone. The passage had closed behind me. Only one path now. Forward. One of the monitors flickered, changing view. It showed the parking lot, where my car had once been. And in the corner, a new image, a second chair. Up top. In the open air. Facing the road. And someone was sitting in it. They looked like me. But thinner. Older. Like I'd been sitting there for decades, watching the entrance, waiting for a replacement. My skin crawled. I turned back to the room, eyes darting. Above the chair, something was etched into the wall: "He who witnesses never leaves." And below it, scratched violently into the dirt: "He's still digging." My legs felt weak. Because I knew who he was. The thing from the mirror. The copy. The one I let out. And now it was up there. Wearing my face. And I was down here. Keeping the gate closed. I don't remember sitting down. One moment, I was standing, hands trembling, heart hammering. The next, I was in the chair. And it was comfortable. Familiar. Too familiar. Like I'd been here before. The monitors buzzed faintly. One by one, they began showing live feeds from places I'd never seen: a tunnel under a school, where desks sat in neat rows, but no one moved. A gas station restroom mirror, fogged up, with a handprint on the inside. A fire station alarm panel flashing red, but no fire. And finally, a view of the trailer, with a man standing inside. He was holding a flashlight. He looked lost. He looked like me. And then the screen labeled Surface Identity, Active, blinked. The man on screen turned to face the camera. He smiled. Not because he was happy. Because he was being watched. From somewhere in the tunnel, I heard it again. That knock. 3 slow beats. Only this time, it wasn't asking to be let out. It was a heartbeat. And it matched my own. I tried to get up, but the chair held me down. The rusted arms had locked around my wrists like restraints. I opened my mouth to scream, but a monitor blinked. A good watcher is silent. Then I saw the mirror again. Only now, it wasn't in the trailer. It was in the sky. Hovering above the site like a black sun. And in its reflection was a hole. Still digging. Still expanding. Still hungry. The restraints on the chair were no longer just metal. They pulsed with heat, like veins. Alive. I could feel them tightening, sinking to my heartbeat. As if the chair wasn't meant to hold me in place, it was absorbing me. The screens flickered again. This time, they showed other chairs. In other places. One buried beneath a long-abandoned amusement park, vines wrapped around the rusted arms. Another hidden in the sub-basement of a hospital, surrounded by medical equipment that hadn't been used in decades. One inside a burned-out church, charred but intact. Each chair held someone. And every one of them looked like they were trying to scream. But none of them could. I leaned forward, fighting against the bonds. They groaned, flesh tearing from my wrist where the rusted steel bit in. I didn't care. I needed to get out. I needed to, bang. The earth above rumbled. Dust rained from the ceiling. A new monitor powered on. It showed the construction site again, but it had changed. The slab was gone. So were the trailers. So was the fence. And standing where the site had been was a building. Brand new. Modern. Clean. With bright windows and a sign, Crescent Heights, Residential Complex. Coming spring 2026. No one knew what had been buried. They just built over it. Buried me. And still, deep beneath it all, the dirt shifted. Because something was still digging. And someone was still watching. Me. The restraints loosened just enough for me to lean forward. Not escape, just observe. The monitors around me dimmed, except for one. It flickered to a black and white feed. Footage of the site, but from decades ago. I saw men in hard hats. Heavy machinery. A dig in progress, the earliest stages of what would become this cursed place. Then, they found it. A section of soil collapsed. A worker slipped through and vanished. The others rushed to help, but when they pulled him back up, he was wrong. Screaming. Clawing. Speaking in a language no one knew. That man was never seen again. The next frame showed a meeting in a makeshift tent. Blueprints spread across a folding table. Fingers pointing. Faces grim. And then, strangely, they started pouring concrete. They weren't building. They were sealing. A voice crackled from the intercom beside me, low, strained, almost a growl. "You're not the first." I turned my head. There, written in chalk on the wall beside the chair, were names. Each crossed out. Dozens. At the bottom, freshly added, was mine. Not just my first name. My full name. My handwriting. Then the lights in the chamber dimmed, and one more monitor turned on. This one wasn't a live feed. It was a reflection. And behind me stood a figure, tall, skeletal, its eyes two pits of smoldering ash. It didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared. As if to say, "You're part of it now." The figure behind me didn't make a sound. Didn't breathe. Just watched. I couldn't turn around. My body was frozen, as if acknowledging it would give it permission to move. The monitor showing its reflection began to flicker. And with each blink, the thing got closer. In one frame, it stood 5 feet behind me. Next, 3. Then, right beside the chair. And I still couldn't move. It whispered, not in sound, but in memory. I saw flashes, me as a child, watching dirt pour from a bulldozer. My first job interview, shaking hands with a foreman I'd never seen again. Standing over the slab for the first time, telling myself it was just concrete. But now I knew the truth. I hadn't been hired. I'd been chosen. Somehow, my name had always been on the list. The dirt beneath this place had called me before I was born. And now it was time to finish what they started. The monitors all went dark. Only one remained. It showed the slab again, freshly dug up. The ground torn open. The stairwell exposed. And a grave at the bottom. My grave. With a headstone already carved. My full name. My hire date. And the words, "He never clocked out." Suddenly, the chair released me. The restraints hissed open like they were tired of holding back something already theirs. I stood. And the voice returned, no longer whispered, "Go. It's time to remember." The tunnel ahead glowed faintly. The stairwell waited. I stepped toward the glow. The tunnel narrowed, the soil wet and warm like it had just been dug. My boots sank with every step, but I kept going. Because somehow, I knew, this was the end. Not the end of the story. The end of me. The stairwell at the end of the path was familiar. The same one I saw in the footage. The same one beneath the slab. But now, it looked fresh. The earth around it was still collapsing inward. Breathing. As I descended, a low hum filled the air. Not mechanical, vocal. Dozens of voices, humming the same monotonous note. A chorus of the forgotten. Every step downward felt like I was being unmade. Like I was becoming soil, memory, and watcher all at once. I reached the bottom. There, in the chamber, was a second mirror, but not cracked like the others. It was perfectly polished, framed in metal, buried deep in the clay. It showed me. But not as I was. It showed what I'd become. My skin pale. Eyes hollow. Uniform torn and stitched with roots. A part of the earth. The hum stopped. And then I heard my own voice. From the mirror. "Now someone else will dig." Suddenly, I felt hands behind me. Not grabbing, guiding. They led me to the center of the chamber. Where a hole waited. Fresh. Warm. Familiar. I stepped in. The soil rose to meet me. And as it closed over my head, I realized, I wasn't being buried. I was being planted. The soil pressed against my chest, warm like breath, damp like blood. But I could still breathe. I could still see. My eyes remained open even as the dirt covered them. And all around me, I felt movement, slow and rhythmic. As if the earth had veins, and I was now part of its circulatory system. I wasn't dead. Not yet. Just waiting. Like a seed. Above me, I could feel footsteps. Someone walking across the site. Someone new. A new watcher. A new name. The system had selected again. But this time, I could feel something different. Something had changed. The presence buried deeper beneath me, the true thing, the origin, the source of all this. It was waking up. And now I understood why we were chosen. Why the site never stayed sealed. Why the slab always opened again. It didn't want to be buried. It wanted to spread. And we, the Watchers, were the first roots. Our stories were just the beginning. Above me, I felt the rumble of new construction. They were digging again. New buildings. New slabs. More places to bury it. But that never works. You can't bury something that wants to be seen. And I saw it. I see it still. In the dark. In the dirt. In the dreams of the men who'll take this job next. It lives in all of them now. In all of you.